Welcome again to the 2026 Women of Color Leaders Symposium. I am so excited to introduce you to Melinda Coles. Melinda is going to share with us on the embracing of authenticity and vulnerability. Again, Melinda, I welcome you. I thank you for being part of the symposium. And I want to share a little bit with the audience about who you are. Melinda Coles is the founder of Middle Work Consulting, LLC. And as an abundance coach, facilitator, and dreamer, Melinda's goal is to help people trust themselves more. Melinda works with clients to assist them in clearly separating their own priorities, values, and voices from those of everyone around them. As a coach, Melinda supports her clients in identifying the ways their self doubt shows up and sabotages them. And she supports them at uncovering the ways in which they can cultivate and strengthen their self trust. Melinda is a PCC certified coach, a graduate level professor at National University, and holds Bachelor and Master's degree in social work from Syracuse University. Welcome, Melinda. Thank you so much for gracing us with your wisdom. I will turn the floor over to you. And
Thank you.
audience, have fun. Yes.
Thank you so much, Sansa. It is my pleasure and privilege to be here, and I'm super excited to participate in the forum. Thank you so much. All right. So, as Sansa mentioned, I'm Melinda Coles. I'm going to be speaking on embracing authenticity and vulnerability, specifically as women of color leaders and the way that this kind of shows up. And I always like to start out with just kind of asking some questions to really orient us into saying that while we're addressing these topics and thinking about them from our today lens, right, of being a woman of color leader in whatever capacity you are, I like to take us back for a second and say, what did you learn about authenticity and vulnerability when you were growing up? And take a moment and really kind of think about that, right? Was there a cultural component? Was there a familial component that you learned about these particular concepts growing up? Did you learn about them explicitly or were they implied, right? Did you observe how they were demonstrated or their absence? And then I want you to take another moment and ask yourself, what is it that you wish you learned about authenticity and vulnerability when you were growing up? These are principles that get thrown about very regularly, and they oftentimes are used very willy-nilly, where we're not actually defining them, taking the time to define what they mean. If you've ever been in a presentation with me, I'm going to always start out with the definition because I think it's important for that common shared understanding. And so when we think about what does it mean to be authentic, the definition is it's to be of undisputed origin, genuine, true to one's own personality, spirit, or character. And this is so important contextually for our conversation because on the previous slide, we spoke about were there familial components, were there societal or cultural components to what you learned about authenticity growing up? And then we look at the definition and we say that it's actually about being true to yourself. True to your own personality, spirit, or character. And this is so important to hold because it's the fact that my authenticity will look different because I'm different. I'm a unique person. And so we may have similarities as women of color leaders, but we each have our own flavor or our own variation of authenticity. And this is important to keep in mind as we continue to kind of work with the concept. What then is vulnerability? Right? And so a lot of times what we hear is people don't want to be vulnerable. We're afraid of vulnerability. And when we look at the definition, we may understand why people have this perception. Vulnerability is actually defined as the quality or state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally. And this definition kind of knocked my socks off when I first learned it because it speaks to the risk that are inherent with vulnerability. And when we talk about being women of color leaders, when we show up authentically ourselves at the intersection of the various identities that we inhabit, For us, that vulnerability is baked in there. Showing up authentically is to show up vulnerably. Just because we're choosing to show up ourselves in a society, right, that has a perception already. And so, what does that mean for us then? Right? How do we even know? How do we even know if I'm standing in authenticity or not? And I love this quote. You'll know it's for you. You'll know it's not for you, excuse me. You'll know it's not for you anymore when it pulls you away from your authenticity more than it pushes you towards it. You'll know it's not for you anymore when it pulls you away from your authenticity more than it pushes you towards it. And this is so crucial to consider because there are many roles that we inhabit, maybe a job, maybe a relationship, a connection. But when things are pulling us away from who we authentically are at our core, typically that means a shift is needed, right? I also love this quote of I intentionally avoid spaces that require a reduced version of me. I want to be me always and abundantly. Well, what does that mean, right? How do I show up fully myself always and abundantly? And this comes through, is cultivated with self-love. And self-love is a concept that has really gotten watered down in many ways, where we kind of talk about it in a fluffy way, but it actually is a component and a crucial component to start talking about authenticity and vulnerability because it allows us to really lock in with ourselves, our unique selves, our full selves. That means we come with flaws. We have things that we've done well, things that we struggle with. We have things that we may be proud of, things that we areas where we may feel shame, and we greet all of that with love. And when we can do that, it boosts our confidence and our self-esteem. It helps us promote healthy boundaries and it fosters a sense of resilience. So you may be asking yourself, all right, well, then how do I actually know if I'm being authentic, if I'm showing up authentically? And a lot of us overthink things and we like to live in our heads, right? And so I love to bring in the concept of the three brains: your head brain, your heart brain, and your gut brain. And when we find alignment between our head, our heart, and our gut, oftentimes that's our authentic sweet spot. And so when we really look to make decisions, when we look to lead from our internal compass and our guide, when we can get alignment with our head, our heart, and our gut, oftentimes we can operate in a way that is in alignment with our own vision for ourselves. That's in alignment with our values. We started out the conversation, right, by speaking about what what did we learn about vulnerability and authenticity when we were growing up? What did we learn? What didn't we learn? And the other piece that has to come into play now is what do we need to unlearn? What do we want to release that no longer serves us? For many of us in Western culture, we learn to prioritize our head, right? Our logic, our thinking, our rationale. And so then in a lot of ways, we learn to discount or discredit our heart and our gut. But this is about reconnection and reconciliation with all three of the brains in our bodies and finding that internal alignment that aligns with our authenticity. And then we have a choice point, right, of if we decide to show up vulnerably and fully in that. And so here's another question for you to ponder and just to hold. What permission do you need to give yourself to show up authentically? What permission do you need to give yourself to show up authentically? Have you learned have you learned ways to show up that are not authentic to you as a survival strategy, right? Have you learned ways to show up that is pleasing to others around you, but that may abandon yourself? Have you learned to show up in ways that are fulfilling for the other roles that you carry, but that actually don't align with your particular point of view today? What permission do you need to give yourself to show up authentically? This is a question that I ask regularly to my clients because a lot of times I have particularly women of color that come to me that are looking for ways to show up more fully themselves. Even though they're doing well, successful careers, marriages, relationships, families, they still don't feel like themselves. And so the other thing is, how do we give ourselves the chance to reconnect with ourselves over and over again? My authentic self at 44 is different than my authentic self at 24. And how do I continue to recommit to getting to know myself again, to understanding what I need to shed and let go, and to show up authentically myself at every season? I love this quote. Shout out to the version of me that didn't know how things were going to work out, but kept going anyway. Right? This speaks to the vulnerability of not knowing, the vulnerability of uncertainty. And so sometimes we prolong making decisions, we postpone taking steps or taking opportunities because we say it's under the guise of seeking for clarity, but oftentimes what we're actually doing is seeking for certainty. And unfortunately, in most situations, we cannot have certainty. So when we strengthen our self-trust, right, we allow ourselves to attune internally with those three brains, head, heart, and gut. We check in with our own authentic, genuine self, our perspective, and then we allow ourselves to keep going by trusting that we're going to be able to move forward, right, with whatever may come forward. Grieve for the younger version of yourself that didn't know any better, that needed protection, or did what was required to survive. Don't be ashamed of what you had to do. Shame is bondage. And so we affirm adapting to my environment made sense at the time. Whatever the role was, whatever the decision was, right? The ways that we may hold regret that we didn't show up differently. How do we release that? How do we affirm that that was what made sense for us at the time? How do we look at it and say, I did what I could with the tools that I had, and I survived by using the skills that I had? Honesty and acceptance are the path to peace. And I would add an asterisk and say they're also the path to our authenticity. Living with all of ourselves is so crucial for authenticity, for self-love, right? And to for even to set the stage for us to look at being vulnerable. Another crucial ingredient to this puzzle is self-compassion. So, what is self compassion? There are three components to self compassion: mindfulness, self kindness, and common humanity. Mindfulness is really looking at our physical, emotional, and mental experience of the moment, our pain, our joy, but what is happening for me physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually at any given moment? How can I be present to that? How do I practice self kindness and treat myself with kindness, considering my own needs? Many of us are very well versed in the needs of other people and ensuring that the external needs of other folks are met, and really kind of dismissing or negating our own needs. But self kindness says treating ourselves with kindness and considering our own needs. And third, common humanity. A lot of times we have struggles and we feel like they are ours alone. They're our own unique struggle that nobody's ever struggled with before. But when we can find that common humanity and recognize that these experiences are a normal part of being human. So failures, successes, wins, losses, right? All of those are part of the human experience. And when we can normalize that to a common humanity, it helps us tap into being able to actually be truly compassionate to ourselves. And so when we think about self care, unfortunately, has kind of become a watered down sentiment where we're just thinking about bubble baths or going shopping, getting a mani-pedi. But self-care is actually much deeper than that. And when you look at it, self-care is actually the heart of self-compassion. Self-care is a part of how we allow ourselves to show up authentically and vulnerably. Self compassion is kindness towards ourselves. Self care is the way that we enact this kindness towards ourselves. And there's a direct correlation between self compassion and self care. Typically, the more self compassionate we are, the more self care we practice, and vice versa. The less self compassionate we are, the less self care we practice. And there's a direct correlation between that and others. Depending on how judgmental I am of myself, typically that corresponds with how judgmental I am of other people. The less judgmental I am of myself, the less judgmental I might be of others because I'm looking at myself as a full person. I'm accepting myself as a full person, and that increases my capacity to be able to see and accept others also as full people rather than demanding perfection. It is compassionate to ourselves to find loving, meaningful, genuine community, right? To be in community, to allow ourselves to actually be seen and to actually be held. And I love this from Cole Arthur Riley, who wrote Black Liturgies. I'm going to read something from her later on as we close out. But inhale, I won't carry it alone. Exhale, I am no burden. Inhale, I won't carry it alone. Exhale, I am no burden. As women of color leaders, leadership can feel particularly lonely. How do we get supports? Not how do we just give support. We do that. Typically, that's baked into our leadership role. But where do I get nourishment? Where do I get nurturing? Where do I allow myself to lay down what I'm holding and to recognize I don't have to carry it alone? How do I do that? It is compassionate to do that. This is a part of filling our own cup over and over again. And authenticity reminds us to be able to acknowledge I'm human, therefore, that means I cannot do it all. I cannot carry it all. I am human. I have to let it go at times. And that's not a weakness, it's just a reflection of my human nature. Vulnerability is not weakness, it is the courage to let yourself be seen with truth instead of perfection. And that is where real strength begins. And so, as women of color leaders, for a lot of us, we may hold ourselves to a standard of perfection, but it's actually unkind when we do so because we'll never meet that standard. Anything that we do when perfection is the goal will fall short. And so, how do we set an actual goal that says, I want to show up authentically myself? I want to show up fully me. I want to show up vulnerably and acknowledging where I don't know, acknowledging where I do have a growth edge, acknowledging where I do need support, right? How do I allow myself to do that? What do I need to put down or release in order to do that? What do I have to shed in order to stand in that vulnerable space and recognize that it's not a weakness? It doesn't diminish my leadership capability or capacity to acknowledge that I don't have it all together. How do I give myself that grace and compassion over and over and over again? That is the call. When we embrace our vulnerability, we unlock the door to authentic connection and healing. When we embrace our vulnerability, when we acknowledge authentically where our struggle areas are, where our growth areas are, where our growth edges are, and we give ourselves that permission to show up in that authenticity, recognizing that people may judge, people may respond poorly, people may not be able to handle it, but when we still allow ourselves to do that vulnerably, it unlocks the door to authentic connection and healing. And the thing about this, and I want to underscore this, is it's personally and professionally. It's personally and professionally that we give ourselves this permission to show up in our humanity. And that is to explicitly inhabit our authenticity and thereby our vulnerability. When we take the courageous step to be vulnerable, we let ourselves be fully seen without knowing the response. And that's beautiful. And this goes back to that unknown. We can never be fully certain of how people will meet our vulnerability. And that doesn't mean that we should not show up vulnerably anyway. Does that make sense? We have to still make sure that we connect and attune to ourselves internally. And when we get that alignment, we give ourselves that permission to show up that way. And other people have to handle what they can and release what they can't. But that's not for us to hold. We don't have to hold how somebody's going to receive us. Now, we do have to use our discernment and recognize, is this an environment that is safe, that I feel safe and able to show up in? And if not, maybe there needs to be a reassessment, right, of is this the place for me? One of the asks for this symposium was that we provided, a free gift. And so this is what I provided. This is my offering, journal prompts. Vulnerability and authenticity are key components that we're going to meet over and over again. And oftentimes being able to really just kind of have that internal reflection can be invaluable. And so really here, just I'm not going to read them all, but here are just some prompts to help you really look at where you need to be in alignment, where you need realignment, right? When do you feel like your most authentic self? What permission do you need to give yourself to trust yourself? What is your unwavering why? Connecting with yourself in this way, doing these prompts over and over again can really help us tap into that vulnerability and authenticity. So I hope you do take that time and space for yourself. This is the prayer I was telling you about from Cole Arthur Riley, the author of Black Liturgies. And I wanted to share it because it's just so profound when you think about our connection, our need for connection, or as she calls it, for being known. Divine community. We want to be known, and we're terrified of being known, of being laid bare in the presence of another. We are grateful that you are not a God who demands a spirituality rooted in some solitary existence, but it is hard to belong without allowing the direction of our lives to be dictated by those from whom we seek affirmation. Help us to daily discern the truth of our selfhood, that our communities would offer insight without commanding assimilation. As we find spaces that truly see and know us, help us to not run from them. The more beautiful a thing is, the more terrified we are of losing it. Do not let this terror keep us from the love we were meant for. And as we learn to accept friendship and care, may we be stirred to extend it to others. Keep us from contributing to loneliness and dislocation in the world, knowing that our freedom is mysteriously entwined with the freedom of those around us. Amen. And this is, I thought, just a beautiful prayer to include because it really speaks to being present to ourselves and to others, being of service to ourselves and to others. This always connects me into gratitude, right? The quality of being thankful, readiness to show appreciation for and to return kindness. I am extending my gratitude to you for your presence here today. And I hope that you also extend gratitude to yourself for showing up today and being fully present. But over and over again, extend gratitude to yourself for all that you're doing that people may not even know about. And so there's oftentimes so much focus on what we don't have, what's not going well. And there's just a reminder of things that you do have. You can tap into this at any given moment. In this moment, you have life, inherent value, undeniable talent, the present moment, people who love you, the ability to try again, the gift of your intuition, dreams and goals to cultivate, reasons to be proud of yourself, the option to forgive yourself, power to choose your response, a mind capable of positive change, the chance to apply lessons learned, a body to respect and take care of, permission to be a work in progress, and a voice that deserves to be heard. And this is your authentic self. And when we inhabit this fully, we show up in our vulnerability. I appreciate you spending time with me this afternoon, this day for this forum. And here's my contact information. Please do reach out. Thank you again, Santa, for including me. I have really enjoyed this time.
Melinda Coles, thank you. My dear friend and colleague from many, many years ago continues to be the powerhouse that she is today as a coach. And I really thank you. Melinda, I took a couple of notes, of
Mm,
course, a
okay.
couple of tips. I love just reminding people that showing up authentically for people of color, for women leaders, women powerful, and women of color is
Yes.
vulnerable.
Yes.
Love that. And so let's embrace the vulnerability. I also love the idea that we are not to let, and I'm not doing a direct quote, we're not to let our terror keep us from love. Wow. Wow. Thank you for these messages. And finally, the three brains: head, heart, and gut.
Yes.
Thank you, Melinda. Thank you
Thank you,
so much for
Santa.
being here. And audience, I hope you enjoyed, that you got some tips, and just hang out because there's more to come. Again, thank you everyone for being here. And Melinda, thank you for your offering. Many blessings, my sister.
Thank you so much, Santa.